Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. Today I have author Tim Durling. I think I pronounced that correctly. And we're going to talk about his book Unspooled, and it's about eight-track cassettes. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing really good. Al, thanks for having me on to talk about the my first book. This is awesome.
This is your very first book. I know you've got more books, but we'll get
Yeah,
to those.
I got five
Yeah,
now, but
we will
this
get to
is
that.
where it all began.
Yeah, we will get to that later on in the episode. So, first of all, what drew you into collecting eight tracks? Or actually, first of all, tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay, yeah, it's Unspooled started from an idea that I'd had probably dating back to the mid 90s. So I'm old enough to remember eight tracks. I was born in 74, so my earliest memories of popular music would be being around some of my cousins, and they had uh, the popular albums of the day around 79, 80. So they had things like Blondie and the Cars, and I want to say AC/DC, like, just whatever was popular. And yeah, there you go. It might even have been that one. But so I remember them, and I also remember my grandparents had like Charlie Pride and Kenny Rogers, like country eight tracks, and I've always just been fascinated by music and in all formats, right? But after a while, they just kind of disappeared. You only saw eight tracks at yard sales, right, or marked down, or it got to be where most people I knew were buying cassette tapes until CDs kind of came out at the end. It really became popular at the end of the 80s. So once I started really starting a music collection and getting into a lot of 70s classic rock, eventually I started to wonder, when did eight tracks actually stop being made? And I came to find out that they didn't stop as soon as I thought they did. I always figured it was around the turn of the 80s, and it really was around 1981, 1982. That's when you stopped seeing them in stores. But if anybody remembers Columbia House, or to a lesser extent RCA Music Service, but mail order music clubs, they kept going with eight tracks. In fact, they kept going all the way to 1988, which is a lot later than I think most people realize. And so I thought there needs to be, once I discovered there needs to be a book done about this phenomenon, because it's a very strange, to me, it's a very strange thing that CDs and eight tracks coexisted for about 3 or 4 years. And that's not all the book is about. It's about music collecting, and it's kind of a trip through the 80s, and there is some biographical stuff in there. But I think anybody that grew up in that time period will find something to enjoy about the book. It's a beautifully laid out book. Matthew Phillips is a good friend of mine. He works for Go North Design, and he did a great job designing the book. So it's kind of a coffee table book. It's kind of a thing you can open up and read from any page. You don't have to read it from cover to cover. And I'm very happy with how it came out. But that's where the idea came from, was finding out that they kept making eight tracks all the way, almost all the way through the 80s.
So, other than finding that they made eight tracks that long, was there anything else that drew you into collecting eight tracks?
Yeah, mainly it was, I just, if I liked a band, and I always liked having albums in various formats. So I'd have the cassette, and then I'd find the record, and then once CDs came around, started buying CDs. So it was just the idea of formats, finding as many different formats as I could. And so when you start doing that, you start getting into the question of, okay, well, if I'm collecting, well, Led Zeppelin or whatever, are all of their albums on 8 track, or is it just a few of them? Or, and then, before the internet, it was really hard to find these things out. It was just school of hard knocks. You just had to hit every pawn shop and yard sale and flea market you could come across. But the internet certainly made it quite a bit easier.
When did you decide to write Unspooled?
So that, in a strange way, it started post COVID, because that's when I started doing a lot of Zoom calls, like just like we're doing now, and got introduced to people all around the world. And one of the people that I ended up talking to was someone who I'd had quite a few of his books, and I was a fan of his writing. He's a fellow Canadian writer by the name of Martin Popoff. And I had Martin on my channel, and I wanted to ask him what he remembered because he's about 10 years older than me. I wanted to ask him what he remembered about when you stopped seeing 8-track tapes in stores. And he kind of agreed that he seems to think it was around the turn of the 80s, but he had no idea that the record clubs kept making them. And he thought, I think you have a book idea here. And so when an author that I looked up to said that I had a book idea, that's when I really started thinking maybe I do have a book idea. I had no plans on becoming a writer, like becoming an author. It just kind of happened by accident. So that's really when it started, was probably the beginning of 2021, I would say.
Right on. I had Martin on my show a couple of weeks ago. We talked about his Guns N' Roses book.
Yeah, Martin's become a good friend and a mentor, and I've asked him a lot of questions about different books. Martin actually wrote the foreword to this book, and yeah, he's appeared in another one of my books too. So yeah, it's if there's anything I want to know, I'll see what Martin thinks about this and shoot him a message.
Right. I've talked to him a couple of times. He's a really nice guy and he's really easy to talk to.
Oh
He's
yeah, yeah.
probably one of my favorite people to interview.
Yeah, Martin's pretty easygoing. I we happened to how I got to know him. We ended up on the same show for a channel called Rush Fans, which is just what it sounds like. It's about fans of Rush. And so after I met him there, I messaged him right away. I said, before he forgets, I'm gonna say, hey Martin, we were on Rush Fans. Wonder if you'd like to be a guest on my show. And it kind of started from there. And yeah, I've had him on several times when he's put different books out. So yeah, he had a lot to do with giving me the encouragement because I thought, yeah, if Martin Popoff thinks there's a book idea and he's not going to do it, then I guess it's I'm going to start writing some ideas down and see where it takes me.
So from the initial idea until the final draft, how long did this project take?
I want to say that it took the better part of the year 2021. I think I started writing it sometime in January of that year, and I want to say it was September or October when it came out. When it first came out, it came out through a Kickstarter campaign, a very successful one, really exceeded all my expectations. So that book sold very, very well in its initial run, and then there was still a lot of demand for it, so we had a bunch more run off. And this was, physically getting the books sent and having to package them, and we had different. You could order a hardcover, soft cover, lots of different options. The cool thing about it was that once those were gone, they were gone, and I thought, well, that was fun. You know, I really thought, okay, well, that was it. I wrote a book, cool. But found out through another author that I've gotten to know, a guy named Julian Gill, who's written a lot of books. He's written a lot of Kiss books, and he started putting books out through Amazon. And I said, how did you do that? Because that wasn't an option when I first started working on Unspooled. And so Unspooled ended up becoming my first book to come out through Amazon as well, the second edition of that, which is great because I don't have to ship them. It's print to order, no matter what country you live in, you get it really quick. And that really gave me the impetus to, well, maybe I'll do another book. And so, yeah, it kind of that's how it went. But it probably, to answer your question, I know I've gone off the track, but it probably took 8 or 9 months between the first idea of it and it actually getting released.
Yeah. Julian is also a friend of mine. Let's see how
Yeah.
many more friends we can, mutual
Well, see, you
friends.
know what? You're when you're in this sort of world, yeah, there's a lot of common ground. It's really cool
Yeah.
finding out who our mutuals are.
Yeah. I've read several of Julian's books and we've hung out a few times at different, Kiss related events, podcast expos, stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Julian actually contributed a chapter to Unspooled about Kiss collectors in general and how we tend to be a little bit crazy. But oddly enough, of all the things he collects, his 8 tracks was not one of them. But he said, you might, now you got me thinking I should probably look for them.
Well, he is somewhat of a completist at times, so
Absolutely.
it will be interesting to see if he does a show about 8 tracks.
Yeah. I've been waiting to see.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what was the most difficult part of this project?
Wow. Um, I I'm trying to think. It took a long time, but unless I've blocked it from my mind, I can't really think of any major obstacles. Had no idea what to expect going into this being, it was the first time that I wrote a book and for my friend Matt, it was the first time he designed one. He's a designer by trade, so that part of it came really easy to him, but he's also a perfectionist and that's why the pictures look so good. But uh I can't really think if there were any real obstacles to getting the book out. It's just that good things take time. Actually, you know what? The hardest part in all of my books, is the proofreading. The proofreading is and now I have someone else do the proofreading because it's just about impossible to proofread your own words, your own writing, because I think in the back of your mind you know what it's supposed to say, so that's what you see, and you can't see a mistake, a spelling mistake or a grammar error right in front of you. So proofreading is probably the part that takes the longest these days, and it certainly is the case with Unspooled. Even though Unspooled is there's a lot of pictures in it, but there is a lot of text. So it's making sure that it's as good as it can be, as correct as it can be.
So, were there any requirements to license photos of any of the officially released recordings or of the record club advertisements?
So um what happened there, and yes, that was a concern, but almost all of the pictures in Unspooled are from my own collection, so they're my own pictures. So they're pictures that are taken of something that I owned. I didn't use, I didn't put like a Kiss logo on the front of it or something like that. If there's a Kiss logo, it's because it's one of many pictures of 8 tracks that, like I said, are from my own collection. I didn't, snag photos from online. So that's how I got around that. And I also got a friend of mine named Sterling Charles, who's a huge 8 track collector. And at the time, he had a lot of the later 80s 8 tracks that I didn't have. So he sent me some pictures that he took and he gave me permission to use those. So that's how I got around those issues.
One of the topics that you brought up in the book was about the Sparkomatic 8-track cassette or 8-track to cassette adapter.
Yep.
I had one of those in my 1975 Ford Granada in 1987, 1988, around that time. And I learned really quickly to dub my good cassettes because those Sparkomatics would would eat a tape and spit it out. So I always dubbed them one of those cheap Sertron brand because I couldn't afford the Maxwell or the Maxell rather, or the Memorex tapes.
You brought
So
back some memories there with Sertron. I can still remember buying those packages. They didn't even have cases. They came in a plastic bag of 3 of them with I still had a white and an orange label on them. Oh
right.
man, I went through a lot of those.
Right. And the funny thing is one of my childhood friends and I were texting earlier today and we were talking about lossy versus lossless. And I said I never really was one of those hardcore audiophiles because I had those Sertron tapes. So essentially I've been listening to lossy music all my life. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm not really much of an audiophile either, but what made 8 tracks popular was the portability that they offered. It was the first time that you could listen to whatever album you wanted to listen to in your own vehicle when you wanted to. So, okay, maybe the songs are out of order, or maybe songs are split in the middle of them as they change the programs over, but I still get to listen to, whatever I want to listen to at that time. And it was a very strange format, and it's a really strange thing to know that they kept making them all the way through 1988, because like I said, I grew up in the 80s and I don't remember. I had no idea about this. Now, part of the reason for that is that in Canada, up here, Columbia House stopped making 8 tracks in 1984. So they kept making them longer than they were in retail stores, but not as long as the US branch of Columbia House made them. I don't know why they kept making them, and I don't know why they stopped. Those are two questions that I don't have the answer to. I really wanted to try and find someone that worked at Columbia House or RCA Music Service and say, what can you tell me about, the decision to continue to make them, and then the eventual decision to, okay, I guess we're done with these now. And why did you stop when you did? And because it doesn't make any sense to November up to November of 1988, certain titles were still available in 8 track, because I don't even know anybody that actively used 8 tracks by the end of the 80s. They were in an attic somewhere, or they were, like I said, yard sales, like they were obsolete.
Yeah. This kind of brought back a memory of my childhood because I can remember going to Kmart with my dad, and he would be looking through the 8 tracks. And of course, they were in this big display, and there was a hole about that
Yep.
big around. So you stick
Yep.
your hand in and you could look at them, but you
Yep.
couldn't get it
You
out.
had to ask the
You had to
cashier to
ask.
unlock. I remember that. Yeah,
I know.
vaguely,
And,
just
and
vaguely.
that literally just popped into my head now,
Yep.
and I've been prepping for this for a couple of days.
Yep.
But that's some of those great childhood memories, in the car with my dad, listening to the Beatles or the Guess Who or the Eagles, stuff like
Yep.
that. So
Yeah. No,
long
that's
live the 8 track.
yeah, that's I really wanted it to capture some memories with this book, even down to like there are 8 chapters in my book, and I divided each chapter into 4 subchapters, just like an 8 track was divided into 4 programs, and whatever chapter you're on, that's the one that's lit up. Because you used to have the 8 track players, like I can remember my grandparents had when it was one of those big cabinet style ones where it was all like it was lit up, and whatever program was playing, that would be the number that was lit up while it was playing. So I wanted to honor that.
Right. And I also like how you use song titles for that.
Yeah, I really tried to match the song title to what the chapter was about, and something that was appropriate to the 8 track area. Yeah, that was, once it got to those stages, that was the real fun part of it, because the main work of the writing, it was done. And you're right, just to bring that the 8 track adapter back. I mean, it's no different than when VHS tapes stopped becoming popular and then DVDs were coming in, they started making those dual DVD VHS players, because you're dealing with a format change. You're dealing with, you've got a case of VCR tapes, VHS tapes, and you don't really want to replace them all, but the new titles aren't coming out on VHS, so you got to get a DVD player. So it's nothing new. The format changes, just that's just part of technology, right? As far as physical music is concerned.
Yeah, I literally just this is September, so it was sometime in August. I had a DVD VHS combo that has been sitting on my desk holding my monitor up for
Yep,
years, and I finally decided taking this thing to the Goodwill. You
yep.
know? And I also had a DVD recorder, so I took them both to Goodwill because I haven't used them in years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. That brings up a good point. By the end of the 80s, the only 8 tracks I was seeing in stores were in the dump bins for 50 cents or less, like sealed new tapes. They had no value whatsoever, and people couldn't sell them cheap enough. Well, now we come to find out there are certain titles that are actually quite valuable, quite rare. And I wonder if VHS tapes are ever going to have that same thing happen, because everybody's got VHS tapes from, whether they're their kids' movies, or things that they bought, TV series, volume one through whatever. And VHS tapes are just literally worthless now. But I wonder if there'll ever come a time where it's like, boy, I wish I'd held on to that particular one. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how many 8 tracks are currently in your collection?
Well, I'm looking up at them right now. It's a few hundred, just real quick. Listen, one, two, three, four, five, six. Just off the cuff, I'm going to say about 330.
Well, that's about 329 more than I have. And this is for anybody that can't see this. It is Blondie's Auto American album on 8 track, which was released in 1980, I believe.
I think
And
so.
and I found this cleaning out my mother-in-law's house in a closet on a shelf. And this thing is in really, really good condition. I
Yeah, it
don't
doesn't look like it has a lot of bubbling on it. That tends to
know.
happen with those.
Yeah, just a little bit of bubbling on the back and one little bubble on the front. But I've never bothered to look up to see if it's worth anything. I just thought it was neat, so I grabbed it. And it's one of the few things that we didn't either give away or throw away.
That was a pretty common tape. I don't think that one's a particularly
Yeah,
I mean, it has nothing to do with the quality of the music
right.
on it, but there are certain ones that if you're starting an 8-track collection, well, I say this like back in the early 90s, if you were starting an 8-track collection, there were certain 8-tracks that you saw a lot of, right? You
Hmm.
saw Boston's first album all the time. You saw the Eagles' greatest hits. Like there's certain ones, right? But the titles that are really worth a lot are they tend to be those record club only ones. A lot of the heavier bands, their albums will, if they do go up for sale, they'll go for big prices. Like I know like ones that will just blow your mind. I mean, I was actually looking on eBay today as we're filming this, and someone is selling a copy of U2's The Joshua Tree, and I think it's at 1,000 now.
So, do you have that one in your collection?
Well, I'm not a U2 fan,
Well,
but just the idea, somebody might say, hold up. U2 the Joshua Tree from 1987 on 8-track. Yes, it's real. It exists. It's just that there aren't too many of them, right? So basically, bands and artists that people collect. You have people that collect 8-tracks just for the sake of it. Then you have people that just collect the record club only 8-tracks. But if you've got people that collect 8-tracks, but they're also collecting certain bands or whatever, if it's a band that's still popular, that's when you're going to get into the bidding wars with people. Like, one of the craziest examples I've heard tell of is and this is a band that, as far as I know, the only 8-tracks they have are their first three albums, which are 80, 81, and 82. So they're not even, they would have just come out retail. And that's Iron Maiden. Again, another band that you wouldn't associate with the 8-track era, but their first three albums came out on 8-track, and those go for big bucks. Um, and as you can imagine, you also have to be on the lookout for counterfeits because people will try to put one over on people. But one thing I've noticed, it's pretty hard to fake um, the aging process. You know what I mean? Like if you see a rare album on 8-track and there doesn't look like they're asking for too much money and it looks too perfect, it's probably a fake. There is such a thing. It's got to have the 8-tracks that are in the best shape have something on it to show the ravages of time.
right. We all
We
have
all
that
do,
problem.
right? Yeah, yeah. Wear it proudly. Don't try to hide it.
That's why my beard is white now.
Yeah.
So, what is the rarest 8-track in your collection?
Um, I've never gone on Discogs and just looked at my 8-tracks to see what the priciest one is. I know the newest, well, I should say the newest one. Like I said, Columbia House stopped making them in 1988. I do have one from 2009 because Cheap Trick put out an album called The Latest in 2009, and they put it on an 8-track as well as vinyl and CD. So I am fortunate enough to have that. That's kind of an exception. I have Journey's Greatest Hits, which is one of the last 8-tracks ever put out by a record label. That came out in November 88. It's one of my prized possessions. I'm not sure how rare. Well, I know it's rare. I'm not sure how much money it would go for because it's like even if you look on eBay and say, well, what's how much is somebody asking for this? Okay, well they're asking this much. Do you know anybody personally that would pay that? It's like, yeah, it's worth this much, but who's it worth that much to? You got to find the right buyer. I've got odd ones. I've got ones like Europe, The Final Countdown, uh, Fleetwood Mac, Tango in the Night. The later '80s ones, Heart, Bad Animals. Those are kind of my prized possessions because it's just so weird that these albums that I remember when they were new coming out, as I was currently listening to the radio, buying cassettes, having no idea that 8-tracks were coming out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I've got some that I wouldn't want to try and find again.
So, is there a holy grail 8-track that you've added to your collection?
Oh yeah, yeah. I really, I like completing collections, and that if I like getting all of the albums that a band puts out in a certain format, and this year I've added three. I got I'm still missing two Kiss 8 tracks. I'm missing Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up, but I found Animalize, which is the very last Kiss album to come out on 8 track. So that's from '84. So I was really happy to get that. Hopefully, I find the other two. I've got Van Halen 5150, which completed my Van Halen 8 track collection. And probably the big one, the one that I thought I'd never ever find. I just happened to be talking to someone that was in the business of buying and selling them, and I bought Rush Power Windows, which is their last album to come out on 8 track. So yeah, those were, I don't listen to them. Uh, I listen to the CDs, and I put the 8 tracks up on my shelf and kind of admire them. But yeah, those are some of the grails. They were once grails, and now I have them.
So are there grails that you've yet to find?
Oh yeah.
Obviously you've mentioned the Kiss albums you
Oh
haven't
yeah.
found.
I would say if I had to say like 10 grails, I'd say those two Kiss ones. One that is just I've never seen it come up for sale, but it does exist is the first Bon Jovi album. There is a Bon Jovi 8 track, believe it or not. I'd love to have it. Um, I'd love to have the first Night Ranger album, Dawn Patrol. That one's very scarce. For some reason, I can't seem to get a beat on that one. I'd like to get David Lee Roth, Eat 'em and Smile. That's one of the first back in the mid 90s, that's one of the first 8 tracks I saw that made me realize they made them way longer than I thought. Because I saw a picture of it, I'm like, that's from 1986, and that's on 8 track. How is that possible? So that was like a big part of starting me on this whole journey. Um, Man, I've been really really fortunate. Aerosmith Done with Mirrors. That's one I'd like to find. That's the only Aerosmith I don't have on 8 track. Yeah, there's not too many now. I've done quite well considering. I never thought I'd have nearly as many as I do.
Very cool. What is the furthest you have ever traveled to score an 8 track?
Boy, I've never actually traveled with the express purpose of going to get an 8 track. I've usually found them online. Um, and there's only one time I actually found what I call an RCO, which is a record club only 8 track that was never released to retail. The only time I found one in the wild was about 8 years ago. Um, I was in Portland, Maine, which is about 6, 7 hours away from where I live across the border. I took my daughter to see a concert, and there's some really good pawn shops and music stores there. And I found Foreigner's Agent Provocateur for $1. I thought that was pretty cool.
Very cool. Is there anything you'd like to mention that we have yet to cover?
Um, all my books, including Unspooled, are available through Amazon. All anyone has to do is type in my name, Tim Durling, and they should all come up. And whether you live in the UK or New Zealand or wherever it is, whatever your country's Amazon is, you order it directly from there. There's no cross-country shipping or anything like that. You'll get it in a few days, and it's print to order. And the books come out very well. Like the rest of my books after Unspooled, they have color covers, but they don't have color pages in between them. But the black and white photos come out really, really well. So,
Cool. What are the titles of those books?
okay, so I'll just show them real quick in the order that they came out. So the second book that I put out, every one of these after this has all been on one band or artist. One of my favorite bands ever and an unsung band is Y&T, and they've never had a book on them. So I put this out end of 2003. It's called Down for the Count. Was very fortunate to have the one and only Hugh Syme design the album cover. People can look up his name. I can almost guarantee if you're watching this, you've got an album cover he designed in your collection. Next one, another one of my favorite. They're well known, but they're not as well known as I think they should be. Kansas. This is called Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. Talks about each of their albums, studio albums. The end of last year, I put this one out, Red on Black, the listener's guide to Sammy Hagar. This concentrates on his solo stuff. And my current book that came out in June is called Sing Me Away, the Night Ranger album review. So that's it. That's my repertoire as of right now. And I'm working on three more they're in various stages of completeness now.
Very good. Where can my listeners find you online?
So my YouTube channel is Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I've been doing it since 2014. If you go to timsvinylconfessions.com, it'll take you right to my YouTube page. That's where you'll find me on Facebook. That's where you'll find me on Twitter, and that's when you'll find me on Instagram under Tim's Vinyl Confessions. So, yeah, just me talking about the music I love, and actually, these books are just kind of an extension of that.
Right on. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on. This has been fantastic.
Thanks for listening to Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast outlet. Visit BigAlRocks.com to find past episodes, on-demand links to my radio show, links to my social media, and other Big Al shenanigans. Most importantly, please like and share this episode. Peace out.